Oh, hello. My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. We have got another installment in Project Poirot this week, and this week is Five Little Pigs, aka Murder in Retrospect. Again, Agatha Christie just is loving these nursery rhyme titles. I don't know why she's so into it. We just had One Two Buckle My Shoe a couple weeks ago. The next one is Hickory Dickory Dock. She is got a boner for these types of titles, and I don't know why. But anyway, yeah, Five Little Pigs is how I know this book, but I know the alternative title is Murder in Retrospect. So, if you've never watched one of these types of videos before from me, just so you know, I do not do spoilers. I will take you in a plot synopsis up roundabouts to where we find a body, and I will also get into some character details, which could be construed as spoilery, I guess, but I tend to not think of them that way because unless you know the solution to the murder, I just don't think that you're gonna have any problem watching this and then reading the book for yourself. So, with all that said, let's get into a quick little synopsis. So, Five Little Pigs could potentially be called Hercule Poirot cold case, because this is not an active murder situation. So somebody hasn't just recently been killed. This actually is about a crime that took place 16 years prior. And it was kind of like an infamous case where the very famous artist Amias, I think is how you say his name, Amias Crail, was murdered presumably by his wife Caroline Crail, and she was tried, convicted, she went to prison, and she actually died in prison. Upon reaching her 21st birthday, their daughter, who's also named Caroline but goes by Carla, came into this letter that her mother had left for her, and in that letter she basically says hey, I didn't kill your dad, but I had to go through with, I had to take the blame or whatever for reasons. And so Carla is about to get married. She's engaged. She's enfianced. And she doesn't want, she's, I think, kind of feeling if my mom wasn't my dad's murderer, I want to know, because I think she has worries that her fiance will look at her differently over time. Given enough time, he'll wonder if that's in her blood. So she wants to have some sort of resolution one way or the other, and so she goes to Hercule Poirot and asks him to look into the case. And Hercule Poirot kind of does an satisfies himself that she will be okay if either answer is true, that her mom did it or that her mom didn't. And so then he goes about trying to essentially just find out for Carla's sake what really happened. And essentially this is a very close character study. So it's a book that follows basically him questioning and looking into the psyches of the 5 other people who were present in the house at the time, aside from Carla and her parents. And those 5 people are, I believe her name is Angela, who is Carla's aunt / Caroline's younger sister, who was partially blind, I believe. The nanny, basically, and her name was Cecilia, I think. Then there are 2 brothers, Philip and Meredith. Philip was Amias's BFF, and I think that maybe their estates were right next to each other. That sounds right. So they were going back and forth a lot between the 2 houses. So he's there, and then Meredith is a kind of amateur chemist who is also on that country estate. And then the last person in the house was the model for the painting Amias was working on, and her name is Elsa. And Elsa and Amias were having an affair, and there's some kind of conflicting reports about how that affair was going and how Caroline was taking it. Presumably, kind of the official story is that Caroline killed Amias because she thought that he was finally going to leave her for Elsa, and she just couldn't bear it, basically. Those are the characters involved, and basically this book is about Poirot talking to a lot of people and figuring out the timeline of exactly what happened and examining small discrepancies between their various statements. And we do get a solution at the end, but because it's been so long and it's not provable. This is the rare book where the person is not hauled into prison, but you basically get the sense that this person has lived with consequences and will continue to live with consequences. So that's the quick little synopsis, and it's interesting. we're gonna have a hard time talking about this one without too many spoilers, so let's see how I do. So the first thing I want to comment upon is the fact that this book was written in 1941, and there's basically no mention in World War II, and I think at this point we have to think that this is intentional, right? Because I think this is like the 4th book since World War II started, and she is deliberately, like in this case, she's setting the crime in the 20s. Like, she's constantly deliberately leaving out the conflict that's going on, and I'm not sure why. Like, it's just an interesting choice to me. So I guess my kind of comment is, like, watch the space for when she actually starts confronting the fact that World War II is happening. I know that it's a big part of kind of like how, like, the background of Crooked House, which is in a few books. So she must eventually acknowledge the fact that World War II is a thing, but that has not happened yet. So I don't know. It's an interesting thing to kind of wonder why she just is really resistant to incorporating that very important historical event into any part of her books. But yeah, so there's that. And then I also just want to mention that this is the last Poirot book that she's going to write for a while. Like, I think she wrote something like 13 Poirot books in the 30s, or like the 30s / early 40s, and she only writes like 2 more, I think, in the 40s. It's very clear that she was getting tired of Poirot. That's very clear from like kind of the historical record, and I think also just like the way that she treats Poirot increasingly in books. I think she had some level of sort of contempt for her own creation by this point in her career, and like you can kind of understand that. Like, I mean that happened to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle for sure with Sherlock Holmes. Like, he legit killed Sherlock Holmes off and brought him back in an attempt to like not have to write him anymore. So, you know, I think that that's sort of indicative of like having a real like smash hit and then maybe getting a little tired of them. So anyway, this is, I think, a really, really good book. One of her better ones. Like, I'm gonna put it up pretty high. I just think it's a very, very good book, but it's interesting because it is about to be like a long break between this one and the next Hercule Poirot book. So even though she's still clearly capable of writing really good Hercule Poirot books, it seems like she just really kind of lost the juice to do it at this point in her career. Other things to mention is that I think that this book is so good because, like I've said 1,000 times before, I just think that this book really plays to her strengths. You're really examining kind of the attitude, character, and psyches of these various people, including 2 people that we don't get to meet in real life because Amias and Caroline are both dead, and so their stories are told to Murder in Retrospect. You kind of have to piece together what you know of their characters retrospectively. So a lot of what this book is figuring out what kind of man Amias really was and what kind of woman Caroline really was. And it's interesting because you get different shades from each of the characters. So for instance, in terms of like baseline, do each of these people involved think that she did it or didn't do it? Philip Blake thinks she did it and hates her for it. Basically, he feels like, well, Amias was this big artist and she should have understood that side of his temperament. If she killed him in jealousy, then like that's basically like her fault. Whereas his brother is much more sympathetic to her and basically does think she did it, but says like he was treating her awfully, and like Philip acknowledges that he was treating her awfully, but it's like she should have just taken it. And Meredith is like, he was so cruel to her that like it doesn't surprise me that she snapped. The housekeeper / nanny, whatever, Cecilia, she basically does think that Caroline did it, and she was like, Amias was a complete asshole to her, and yeah, she did the right thing. She did the right thing in murdering his adulterous ass. The only problem is she got caught, basically. And then his mistress obviously thinks like, oh, she was just jealous of our great love, and she definitely did it. The only person who does not think that she did it was her sister, Angela, and she just doesn't believe that that was in her character, that she would have done it. And she basically says, you know, this whole thing about Amias leaving her is nonsense because Amias, like, the only woman he ever loved was Caroline, and Caroline understood that despite all of his infidelity. And actually, Philip basically says the same thing. So you kind of have you get all these different kind of portrayals of these 2 characters, and you're hearing a lot of various like chunks of evidence that when you try to put them together almost fit but have slight variances. And that's really what Poirot spends the book trying to kind of like parse out, is really like, were these different things, like, could they be looked at a different way, or did it happen the way that everybody thinks it happened? Like, That's really what he's trying to kind of parse out. I think in terms of like the moral development, the most interesting thing in this book to me is this sort of exploration of adultery and its validity or non-validity. And I think that this book, it's interesting. It has a kind of, how to say, like it reminds me in some ways of kind of the aristocratic view of marital fidelity, but it's also somewhat kind of bourgeois Victorian attitudes in that it seems to be that there's an assumption that he is going to be unfaithful, and really kind of the moral quandary is Caroline's attitude towards it. So different characters feel like either she was completely entitled to feel like he should be being faithful to her, or other characters feel like that, you know, well, he's a man and like he was an artistic man with a very particular temperament, so she shouldn't have expected that. So I think mostly this was an interesting kind of meditation on the nature of marital fidelity, and kind of gender roles too, because you're getting a sense of whether or not different characters think it would have been appropriate for her to have her own affair, whether or not maybe she was having her own affair. And yeah, it's a lot of kind of discussions of like sexual politics and gender dynamics. So I found that all very, very interesting. Like I said, I don't really want to get into too much more because it would get spoilery. I just want to say that I do think that this is an extremely good book. I really, really enjoyed it. I didn't quite give it 5 stars on Goodreads. I think I ended up giving it 4. I'll just say that in terms of ranking, I did put it quite high just because, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I don't know that this would be like the first book I'd recommend to someone to start with Christie, but I do think that it's one that plays to a lot of her strengths that I really enjoyed. And oh, I should just say that the reason it's called Five Little Pigs is because there are 5 witnesses, and I'm trying to remember how it's that one little piggy went to market, one little piggy stayed home, one little piggy had beef, one little piggy had none, one little piggy cried wee 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 all the way home. And I think it's meant to be Philip Blake, because he's a business guy, is the piggy who went to market. Meredith, his kind of like poor country squire brother, is the one who stayed home. Elsa is the one who had roast beef. Cecilia is the one who had none. And then Angela is the one who cried wee 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 all the way home. So yeah, if that does anything for you, I think that that's where the title comes from. So I don't love that she's so obsessed with trying to make these things work, but whatever floats your, you do you, Agatha. You do you, boo-boo. Anyway, I feel like this wasn't a very exciting installment, but I would recommend this book. I enjoyed it. I think my energy is a little depleted because right before I filmed this, I filmed a review of a book that I did not enjoy and was, oh, man, that was a journey, which I think you guys will have seen by now, or you will be about to, no, I think you will be seeing this, you'll be seeing this review on Tuesday, so strap in for that, tune in for that. But anyway, sorry if this was a little low energy. I think I kind of got too excited and didn't have enough energy left over. But I would recommend this book, and I appreciate you guys tuning in for Project Poirot as always. So with that in mind, if you enjoyed this video, please do like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. All that information is listed in the description box below. And I think that does it. I hope you guys are having a really wonderful week, and I will see you back here on Tuesday. Bye!